Welcome to CSIS Online. The way we bring you events is changing, but we'll still present live analysis and award-winning digital media from our Dracopolis Ideas Lab. All on your time, live or on demand. This is CSIS Online.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome. I'm Michael Green. I'm Senior Vice President for Asia and Japan Chair at CSIS and Professor and Director of Asian Studies at Georgetown. And we're delighted to be gathering for the 2021 Kato Prize for service to the U.S. Japan alliance. We're going to be joined by Ambassador Ryozo Kato, for whom the prize is named, Lieutenant General Schneider of U.S. Forces Japan for a keynote address, and other colleagues from government and think tanks. By way of background, this prize was inaugurated in 2008. At that time, Ambassador Ryozo Kato was retiring as the distinguished ambassador from Japan to the United States, going on to a pretty fun job, actually, as commissioner of baseball in Japan. But a number of us wanted to mark Ambassador Kato's contribution to the alliance. Kurt Campbell, who will be joining us later, and I, joined by others, thought what we could do. And we thought, you know, perhaps the best way to mark what Ambassador Kato has done for us in the United States and for our alliance is to take his philosophy, his strategic outlook, and acknowledge it in recognizing rising stars in the US and Japan who are contributing in the alliance. But in the spirit of Ambassador Kato, who used to and still will quote Secretary of State George Shultz's line that diplomacy, and especially alliance management, is like gardening. It takes dedication, creativity, perseverance, discipline. The gardeners don't always get recognized, but we thought it was very important to do that. And so together with colleagues at other think tanks that work on the alliance, we created this prize, and we've given 10. And I want to thank in particular Sheila Smith from the Council on Foreign Relations, who will be introducing our awardees for this year, Richard Fontaine of Center for New American Security, Pat Cronin from Hudson Institute, Mireya Solis of Brookings, and Yuki Tatsumi of the Stimson Center. We gather most years and think, who can we give this award to say thank you. A lot of think tank work between the lines sounds like we're saying not good enough to our friends in government. We thought it was important to say more than good enough. Thank you very, very much. And that's what we'll do this year for our two awardees who my friend Sheila Smith will introduce. So we'll get on with the ceremony and the exchanges and dialogue for this hour. So without further ado, I'd like to turn over the podium, the virtual podium, to Ambassador Ryozo Kato. Kato Taishi, onegai shimasu.
Hello and welcome. I'd like to thank you all for your kind attendance today, in particular, Dr. Mike Green, who made this wonderful event possible. This morning, Japan time, I learned the untimely passing of the former Defense Secretary, Donald Rumsfeld. Throughout his illustrious career, he was a most respected friend of Japan ever since the early 1960s. So my most sincere condolences and profound sympathy to Mrs. Rumsfeld and to all the bereaved members of the family. Now, it's a pleasure to see so many familiar faces and distinguished guests, including my friends, Ambassador Richard Armitage, Dr. Kurt Campbell, and today's keynote speaker, Commander Kevin Schneider. I would also like to recognize our esteemed partners for this award, Dr. Patrick Cronin of the Hudson Institute, Mr. Richard Fontaine of CNAS, Dr. Sheila Smith of CFR, who is my counterpart of the U.S. Chair of CALCON, Dr. Mireya Solis of the Brookings Institution, Yuki Tatsumi-san of the Stimson Center, as well as this year's awardees, Mr. Benjamin Goldberg, and Mr. Hidehiko Nakama. You will have noticed I named you alphabetically, in alphabetical order. This is to forestall any Hollywood-style squabbles over who got top billing. In fact, you are all champions of U.S. Japan relations, and your devotion to our extraordinary alliance makes it stronger every year. One of the few bright aspects of the pandemic has been the rise of electronic meetings, a technology that has empowered us to easily gather so many exceptional people in one virtual room. The downside is that it's actually too easy, making even the most seasoned official struggle for credible excuses when they wish not to attend an online event. So my favorite so far, sorry, but I'm losing my voice and my hearing, which is to say, hats off to you all for taking time from a busy schedule to join us. When Dr. Campbell first proposed establishing this award back in 2008, towards the end of my ambassadorship, I thought nothing could be funnier than joining the name Ryozo Kato with the word award. After so many years as a diplomat, had I somehow mastered the alchemy necessary to deceive the world about my importance, to turn coal into gold, that those poor future awardees are deeply flattered. I said, "Why, Kurt, what an absurd idea." He said, "But it's not going to cost you anything." To which I replied, "Well, then how much does it pay?" Actually, in that moment, I remembered one of my baseball heroes, Joe DiMaggio, for whom the game was never about money, only passion. It is the same spirit that we invite today's winners to accept this so-called honor without honorarium. Which leads us to somehow to Rockford, Illinois, the site of the Anderson Japanese Gardens. Such unassuming beauty may seem to have sprung up fully formed, yet there are always people behind the splendor, constant gardeners whose efforts foster stability and growth. Sometimes we catch a glimpse of these cultivators and acknowledge them with a nod or a smile. But for the most part, they work anonymously. Certain diplomats are that way, quietly maintaining and nurturing the fabric of our societies and our alliance. The public takes for granted the benefits of their labor, assuming this is simply the natural order of things. But successful diplomacy, like gardening, doesn't happen overnight. It requires creativity, patience, and above all, a commitment to what is essential. You may even have to get your hands dirty once in a while. My mentor, late Moto Shina, the member of the Diet, for whom today's host, Dr. Mike Green, once worked, understood this principle better than anyone I ever met. Over the course of his extraordinary career, without any fanfare, he earned the nickname, the wise men of politics. Mr. Goldberg and Mr. Nakama, as we congratulate you for your fine gardening, I would like to offer Shina Sensei as an example and inspiration to you both. Or, if you prefer, Joe DiMaggio. After all, whatever his paycheck, he not only helped the Yankees win 9 World Series championships, he also won the heart of Marilyn Monroe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Ambassador Kato. Thank you. And I think for those who didn't have the great pleasure of working with and learning from Ambassador Kato, as many of us did, you can tell that in addition to gardening skills, a good diplomat has humor. And I also want to reassure Ben that despite Ambassador Kato's reference to gold, the Kato Award is, it's cool looking, but it's well within the U.S. government ethics guidelines. It's not gold, but it is heartfelt and an expression to you and Nakama-san of how much we appreciate what you and your colleagues do for our alliance. We're going to turn to General Schneider in a moment, And I would encourage those of you tuning in, if you would like to ask a question, you can do that through the CSIS event page, and those will be sent to me so I can ask some, if not all, of the questions to General Schneider after his keynote remarks. But in addition to Secretary Rumsfeld, recently we also lost someone who is very dear to many of us and very important for our alliance. And I'm speaking of Tsuyoshi Go Tsunohara, who was generous with his time and insights for so many of us at all different levels, from cabinet secretaries to PhD students and graduate students, and who really, with Mount Fuji Dialogue, built what I think we all will find is an enduring pillar of our relationship. So we've asked Ambassador Richard Armitage to briefly reflect for us on Tsunohara-san's legacy. I think we in Washington, Nikkei, and others will be doing more later, but for now, we'd like to just turn to Ambassador Armitage for a brief reflection.
Well, thank you, Mike, and good morning or good afternoon, wherever you all are. It's such an honor to be with Ryozo Kato, Dr. Green, Sheila, and others today. So you honor me by allowing me to participate. A few words about Go Tsunohara, if I may. Here's a fellow that even in the final days of his life, was thinking of others. He was thinking of his wife and his daughter, whom I had the honor of meeting after her speech. He was thinking about his next efforts with the Mount Fuji Dialogue and with Nikkei. And this is the kind of person, this is the kind of spirit, this is the kind of humanity that I think we want to be engaged in this most important of all relationships, the U.S. Japan relationships. As Mike indicated, Go had enormous ingenuity, but he had enormous curiosity. His curiosity knew no bounds. He never stopped hungering for another answer. He never lacked for another question. Although he had written books about most of the people who have been involved, even tangentially, in U.S. Japan relations, he never stopped. And if there's a lesson that I take from my life, it is you've got to keep pushing even to the very end. Several days before his passing, he and I exchanged emails where he said, where he told me he was looking forward to the next Mount Fuji. And I said, well, I'm just happy to have you here now talking with me via email. Keep it up and keep fighting. And he said, yes, sir. That's the kind of spirit I think we want to have in each other. We want to see in each other, and we want to see in those who are in service to the U.S.-Japan relationship. So, Mike, thank you for the opportunity for saying a few words about Tsunohara-san.
Thank you, Rich. We were all really very, very sad, and it's a big loss, but my understanding is Mount Fuji Dialogue will go on, and I think there and also from CSIS and other institutions in Washington will be finding more ways to say thank you and acknowledge everything that he did for all of us personally and for this alliance. We're really honored that Lieutenant General Kevin Schneider has agreed to give us keynote remarks, put this in context for us, help us understand where we are in the alliance and what we have on the agenda going forward. General Schneider is commander of U.S. Forces Japan and the 5th Air Force Pacific Air Forces at Yokota Air Base. He's the senior U.S. military representative in Japan and is responsible for managing bilateral security issues, overseeing joint and bilateral exercises, administering our status of forces agreement with Japan, improving combat readiness, enhancing the quality of life for the 66,000 military and DoD personnel and their 45,000 dependents. He's a graduate of the Air Force Academy and has a master's from the Marine Corps University. And he's done tours on the Joint Staff, the Central Command, U.S. Air Force Central Command, Pacific Air Forces, and is a command pilot with 4,000 flight hours in F-16s, F-15Es, T-38Cs, UH-1Ns, including over 500 hours of combat flight time during Southern Watch and during Freedom and Iraqi Freedom. So a very significant career and a very important position for an alliance we care about. General Snyder, thanks so very much for joining us. Over to you, sir.
Dr. Green, thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for putting the pressure on right at the start. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today to recognize the newest recipients of the Kato Prize. And as Commander of U.S. Forces Japan, I'm always eager to talk about the alliance, but I'm especially proud when I'm able to join in celebrating the achievements of the individuals who dedicate themselves every day to the values and the missions that underpin the alliance. We all know just over 60 years ago, our countries made history with the signing of the Treaty of Mutual Cooperation and Security. And those two concepts, cooperation and security, are intimately tied. Our enhanced cooperation directly results in enhanced security. And it's why we're here to recognize our Kato Prize awardees today. Both Nakama-san and Mr. Goldberg can tell you our alliance is only as strong as the individuals who form it and the cooperation amongst them. And luckily for me, the U.S. Japan alliance is truly made of some of the strongest men and women, the most innovative thinkers, the most dedicated public servants, and the closest friendships that I have seen in my career. And we have come together both in the face of adversity and opportunity countless times over the past 60 years. And indeed, the most recent example is the close cooperation during the COVID-19 pandemic. And the strength and the resilience of the alliance has been on display since the pandemic began. And our collective quick response to the Diamond Princess in February of 2020, I think, really foreshadowed our ability to respond collectively to emerging challenges in a COVID environment. And most recently, close cooperation amongst the alliance professionals allowed U.S. forces to vaccinate local employees who work on bases in Japan. And every shot counts as we work closely to defeat the virus. And throughout the entire pandemic, we did not allow the virus to be an excuse or a roadblock to training. And JSDF and U.S. forces continued to train and prepare for a wide range of contingencies. I honestly believe that it's because at the core of our relationship lies our vision for and our commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific, and that vision means prosperity. And that's not just for the United States and Japan, but for all nations. It means international waters that remain international, freely navigable to support the trade and market access that that has been critical to Japan retaining its spot as the third largest economy in the world. And it means prosperity in innovation, the economy, human rights, and these are all the values that underpin our own alliance and are the values shared with our vast network of allies and partners around the globe. I mean, beyond just our alliance. And the United States deeply understands and lauds Japan's leadership in upholding the international rules-based order that supports these concepts. It is one that benefits all nations, and while sometimes imperfect, we are dedicated to working together to continually improve upon it. Today, the U.S.-Japan alliance, the cornerstone of peace and security, is the most important, the most critical, and the most consequential alliance we have. And we have recently seen this demonstrated through a number of important engagements between our country's senior leadership, highlighted by the April summit between President Biden and Prime Minister Suga, and then several other high-level leaders, such as the U.S. Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, and our new Indo-PACOM commander, all signaled the importance of the alliance when they made Tokyo their first international stop. And just this past month, the U.S. and Japan leadership joined our partners in Cornwall, UK, to participate in the Group of Seven summit, where U.S. and Japanese leaders had an opportunity to meet and discuss the alliance. And the G7's joint communique released after the summit reiterated the importance of maintaining a free and open Indo-Pacific, which is inclusive and based on the rule of law, which amplifies the same language shared by the alliance leadership earlier this spring. And the relationship between our two democracies extends far beyond the defense sector. Our shared vision for a multilateral international order means we stand together to tackle a range of global threats from COVID-19 and climate change. It also means we are partners in innovation, partners in education, and partners in economic opportunity. And as the world becomes increasingly interconnected and brings new opportunities, our two nations will continue to lead and to grow together. At the same time, Japan has been expanding its leadership role across the Indo-Pacific. It has played a critical role in the Quad, enhancing cooperation with Australia and India. We've also seen Japan's strong engagement with other nations in the region, as well as increased training and operations with our European partners. So there is no denying that the U.S.-Japan alliance is strong and full of potential energy. And these developments are a direct result of the close working relationships and personal friendships of the thousands of dedicated individuals who make up this alliance. And as everyone here can personally attest, these hardworking individuals coordinate closely with one another every single day, and oftentimes at hours of the night, just ask my staff, to preserve the strength of the alliance and the role it plays to ensure the international order remains based on our shared values. However, our work is not complete, and in many areas, this potential energy must truly be harnessed into energy of action in order to fully uphold our treaty commitments. Right now, there are those who actively challenge the international order. At the top of the list, the People's Republic of China continues to behave in an increasingly aggressive manner in the region. And we are watching their actions closely and call on them to abide by and respect international norms. And as Admiral Davidson said when he was the previous Indo-PACOM commander, the strategic competition in the Indo-Pacific is not between two nations. It's the contest of liberty between it's a contest between liberty in the absence of liberty or authoritarianism. And let me be clear, the authoritarian actions run adamantly against the core values we stand behind as the U.S. Japan alliance. The alliance must maintain a credible deterrent to ensure the Indo-Pacific remains a region where Japan and others can thrive and grow more prosperous. And in the face of these developments, we must examine the alliance that was formed 60 years ago and ensure our capabilities are moving at a speed of relevance, where they are advanced and innovative enough that we are able to uphold the commitments we've made in the Treaty of Mutual Cooperation and Security. And I'm stating the obvious here, but credible deterrence hinges upon a competitor's understanding that the likelihood of success and the costs of engagement are too high to incentivize their action. As you all know well, credible deterrence is made possible through commitments to security and a willingness to dedicate resources, whether they be time, manpower, national treasure, innovative thinking, to their defense. The security provided by credible deterrence is predicated on a competitor's perception that aggressive action, coercive action will not be successful or worth the costs that such actions would provoke in response. So high levels of readiness and realistic high quality training by Japan's self-defense forces and US forces are absolutely essential to providing this credible deterrence every day. And they ensure that a potential adversary truly believes in their heart of hearts that the US-Japan alliance has the proper training, the proper capability, and the willingness to defend Japan, and that as a result, any aggressive action would be detrimental to the adversary's own survival. And our commitments can never be just rhetoric. It's the actions that we take. It's the bilateral training to ensure the interoperable defense required by the treaty, the dedication of time and manpower to identifying and resolving vulnerabilities that are truly essential for our collective security. And I'll be honest, we have work to do. And in practical terms, that means conducting high-level, realistic training in Japan. Examples include getting after long-range precision fires, low-level flight training, night fires, multi-domain operations. And it includes bilateral commitments and investments in areas like cyber, space, and emerging technologies. Importantly, I believe we must enhance our live virtual constructive, or LVC, training environments here in Japan, which is cutting-edge technology critical to US and Japanese forces, achieving the most advanced, the most realistic, and the safest training, which is absolutely essential to our mutual security. So our ability to conduct this highest quality training in Japan and the continued close cooperation between our forces is absolutely fundamental to ensuring the security of the free and open Indo-Pacific. And indeed, as we strive to maintain the qualitative edge required for success, as we continue to seize the initiative from our competitors, I'm absolutely confident that both sides of the alliance will continue to make the right kind of substantial fiscal investments and policy improvements to prepare us both for the future. This is not going to be easy, and we cannot rest on our laurels because our adversaries certainly do not and will not. So the alliance must continue to transform and adapt to overcome new challenges and to take advantage of emerging opportunities. And you know this, and our alliance managers know this, and they live it every day. And at the end of the day, this alliance is about people. It's why we're here today, to recognize the actions of individuals whose exceptional contributions to the alliance have been instrumental to its continued success. Our alliance is made up of dedicated individuals who truly believe in what our alliance stands for. For every aircraft you see in the skies near Okinawa, there are highly trained pilots, exceptional aircraft maintainers, and attentive aircrew who believe this alliance and its values. For every ship you see arriving at Yokosuka or Sasebo, there are hundreds of sailors serving away from their families who have made a commitment to the security of Japan and the region. For every exercise conducted at Camp Fuji, there are hundreds of U.S. and Japanese forces who have shared training advice, as well as meals, stories of their families, and cultural experiences with one another. And for every official statement that we hear or read in the press, there are countless individuals who have spent hours engaging and coordinating closely with their counterparts to fully implement our commitments, whether that be in the Joint Committee or operationally coordinated in the Alliance Coordination Mechanism. As I am sure anyone who has worked with the Alliance can attest, our connection is not just one based on history or a threat that's facing us. At its core, this is an alliance based on deep personal friendship and true caring and trust for one another. Japan is rich with history, culture, and generous hospitality, world-class food that's unmatched. And on behalf of the USFJ community serving here, we thank our local communities and the government of Japan for welcoming us and hosting us so warmly. The U.S.-Japan alliance is strong as a direct result of actions by today's awardees, and I am honored to be here today to recognize the hard work and dedication of Ben Goldberg and Nakama Hidehiko for their service to this alliance. Because of your actions and the actions of others like you, the U.S.-Japan alliance continues to thrive, and it continues to grow each day. I thank you all for your service, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
General Snyder, thank you. That was perfect. And I very much appreciate the fact that I started by saying that the think tank guys are the ones who say not good enough. And here the think tank guys are praising our colleagues in government, and you're the one telling us not good enough. And I hope we can, and we will, because we have questions from the audience, get into some of the homework assignments that you put on the table just now. If you'll indulge me for a moment, though, before we go to Q&A, we wanted earlier in the program for Kurt Campbell to say a quick word about Ambassador Kato, the Kato Award. Kurt and I cooked this up back in 2008. Kurt's in the hot seat right now, as you know, as the senior coordinator. And my understanding is he told President Biden he had to leave the Oval Office to say hi to Ben Goldberg and Nakama-san. So Kurt, thanks for stepping away from your busy day and giving us a quick word or two on this occasion.
Mike, thank you very much. Alas, it's even worse than that. You're not allowed to do Zoom meetings in the National Security Council. So I went in this morning, raced back home, and have tried with your excellent team to manage some of the technical challenges. So I'll do this quickly and then get back in the car and go back to the office. But this is what's important for the U.S.-Japan relationship. I just wanted to take a moment to pay my respects. First, I want to thank my dear friend and colleague, Mike Green, CSIS area, all the people who've worked together to sustain this extraordinarily important program, this commemoration, all the things associated with the Kato Prize. Mike and I often reflect that this is a treasured alliance, and it's an alliance built by giants, frankly, people who we follow in their footsteps. Many times, Mike and I have talked about the role that Ryozo Kato and Rich Armitage have played for all of us, but for us individually as friends and colleagues and mentors. And it's an honor to be able to join today and to commemorate Ryozo Kato and the role that he's played in building this relationship, who's frankly, it's always been important. It's always been critical. But I can tell you from my perch today at the White House, it assumes a centrality of purpose that we've never experienced before. And as the general just articulated, we have a very long to-do list ahead that involves deep, hard work, strategic planning, engagement of our militaries, joint engagement on thinking about challenges in Southeast Asia, in the Pacific, and globally increasingly. And we are facing implacable challenges, and challenges that I only think now we're becoming fully cognizant as we go forward. And what will be most important, Mike, as we go forward is to ensure that this treasured alliance, and indeed the responsibilities that we all share together in the maintenance of peace and stability across the Indo-Pacific, that we are building the next generation, and that we are building a group of men and women on both sides of the Pacific, in Japan and the United States, that are deeply committed to sustaining this alliance, to building it, to taking it to new places and to do everything necessary given the challenges that we are going to face in the future. There is not a day that goes by that when I come into the office where I'm not in some ways daunted by the challenges ahead. But I can tell you, Mike, that I always feel calmed by the fact that we have Japan and other key allies in the Indo-Pacific by our sides to confront really unpredictable challenges across the region and the world. So I wanted to come home today quickly, sneak out of the office to come and pay my respects to Ben and Mr. Nika. I know they are both well-deserving, and they've done a lot to earn these accolades. And I, too, wanted to come and just pay my respects to Kato Ryozo and Rich Armitage, two people who've made such an enormous personal and professional difference in my life. And I also want to thank Mike Green and CSIS for all the things that CSIS and he is doing to sustain this critical alliance and America's role in the Indo-Pacific. So I just wanted to come and say thank you. I'll now race back in. And Mike, I wish the awardees strong, interesting careers working on the most important issues that are confronting our two countries at this time. Thank you all very much for the opportunity. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Kurt. And General Snyder, thanks for indulging us for a moment there. You know, it's very important what Kurt said about the focus on the U.S.-Japan alliance and the comfort it gives us in the United States, and frankly, I think to many in not only the Indo-Pacific region but in the world as well. And in the days when Rich and Ryozo Kato were moving this alliance forward, I think it's fair to say we did not have the same focus across the entire U.S. government and Congress on this alliance that we have today. From where you sit in Yokota, General, to the White House, the State Department, we really are more unified in our sense of purpose than I've ever seen. And I say that as a former practitioner and a historian of the alliance. But as you and Kurt both pointed out, the tasks in some ways are more daunting, certainly than I've ever seen in my lifetime. Can I now turn to some questions that I have and we have from the audience? One thing I wanted to ask is about how things look to you 6 years after Japan and the US revised the defense guidelines. Japan introduced historic legislation recognizing the right of collective self-defense, created a National Security Council and more unity of effort within Japan. I'd be interested, first off, General Schneider, from the pointy end of the spear, from your operational perspective, does it look different? Are you seeing opportunities from those changes? I hope so, because it was a lot of work by a lot of people. But how do you see the chapter we're in right now?
Sir, I do. And I'll say one thing, the external environment here since 2015 has certainly changed, and a lot of that has to do with the actions that take place in Beijing, Pyongyang, and Moscow. So that, as the Japanese are quick to say, the security environment is severe, and they are absolutely right about that. In face of those, evolving and rapidly changing threats, the bilateral forces have got to be more capable, more effective, and better. And I throw out the better, faster, more resilient, more capable, more interoperable. All the taglines there. And part of that, I think, it involves acquisition programs, and both countries, I think, are now taking a hard look with roles, missions, and capabilities as to what acquisition programs both nations need to truly invest in. But there's another part of it which I tried to allude to into the remarks, has to do with training and readiness. The force that we have today must continue to evolve, must continue to adapt, and we've got to take advantage of the opportunities that we do have. So I am seeing progress in that regard. We are able to we have made ground, I'd say notable ground over the last couple of years to do more with the forces that we do have in Japan. And I don't say that just U.S. forces, but the JSDF and U.S. forces working together. We do a lot of training outside of Japan. Both of our forces do, and I think we need to do more of it in Japan, both for the operational advantages, but also for the messaging that it sends as well. But I think specifically, one of the aspects of what happened in 2015 and the defense guidelines, that had to do with collective self-defense. that has been a benefit, but that is all just a small portion, I think, of what needs to take place. I think we really have got to get after, taking a hard look at the acquisition programs and evolving the training and readiness of the forces that we both maintain out here.
You and I have had this discussion a little bit in the past, but in that context, in terms of requirements, defining requirements, acquisition, training, if you look across the ocean at the U.S.-Korea alliance or further afield to NATO, a joint and combined command relationship imposes a certain discipline on both acquisition and training. Can we do that with the U.S.-Japan alliance without a joint and combined relationship? Are there ways to replicate that within the political context we have? How do we structure ourselves to do what you're saying?
I think we need to explore it. And I realize that there are legal hurdles and challenges both here in Japan and maybe to a lesser extent in the United States as it comes to command and control and those authorities. But I honestly believe we've got to take a look and explore what options exist. And I look at our existing command and control structure, bilateral. I would argue we don't have unity of command, but we have unity of effort. There are things that, even with that bilateral structure, there are things that we do well with the alliance coordination mechanism as we work through alliance issues each day. But when I look at operational effectiveness and actually dealing with crisis, conflict, combat, there is a benefit to having a combined C2 structure where we have Japanese and Americans sitting side by side together daily, and where that architecture, that system, that framework has already been established, and we don't have to surge into it in times of a crisis or a conflict. Again, just speaking from personal opinion, our system works right now, but when I look at the speed of how a fight is likely going to evolve or erupt in the Western Pacific, we have got to do better, and we have got to have a more efficient command and control structure, bilateral as it is, that's relevant and can move at the speed of a rapidly changing crisis.
I think history suggests that if we ever do have to go in, from peacetime into crisis mode, we'll have to do that. I mean, you served in Iraq. We had to create, CENTCOM could not do the fight. We had to create a new command for that. In the Second World War, I mean, again and again, history teaches us that we end up patching these together in the fight. And I hear you saying we need to get a little ready before anything like that happens.
Absolutely. Certainly need to take a look at it and understand what it would take to make that happen. But I just don't know if we're going to have the luxury of time that we saw in crises and conflicts in the CENTCOM AOR if it becomes a challenge in the Western Pacific.
On the to-do list, you put in long-range fires at the top of the list. And one of the questions we have from our audience is about the post-INF environment in the Western Pacific and in our alliance with Japan. Can you say a bit more about long-range fires? Japan obviously is actively debating what kind of capabilities it might develop. It comes back to this question of jointness. Is this a joint capability? Is this a US capability? And there are also questions we have from the audience about whether, I don't know if you saw today's Washington Post editorial, but it said, China's building too many missiles. We need an arms control treaty. That's beyond your mandate perhaps, but there is some thinking that we need to focus on long-range fires. We need to focus on our own ballistic missiles to get into this negotiation with China. You don't have to take that one on. Maybe that's a state. Maybe we can ask Ben Goldberg. That's a State Department question. But in terms of long-range fires, what's your thinking about how the operational concept, the ways we ought to think about it going forward for the U.S. and Japan both?
Yeah, I'll have to be careful here. I colored 2 years ago. I colored outside the lines when answering a similar question and got a little bit of guidance from higher headquarters on this one. So again, I'll speak from personal opinion, but in the aftermath of, at the time that the Aegis Ashore decision was being made here in Japan, there was also the ongoing debate or discussion about long-range fires within the country of Japan and what the nation of Japan was going to do with that. So very interested to see where that dialogue goes and what doors that opens going forward. But I absolutely agree, it is a dialogue that needs to occur here in this country. And there are, again, sovereign decisions that will need to be made by the government of Japan. But I am optimistic in the fact that there is, I think, some clear-eyed recognition of the threats that are being posed, from a number of different directions by the neighbors out here. But I think that, as our senior leaders and the next 2+2 takes place or is scheduled for later in this year, optimistic that both countries will be in a better position to have an open and frank dialogue about what long-range fires looks like, whether those be Japanese systems or development and evolution of Japanese systems, or discussions about U.S. systems that could possibly be used out here in this theater. And again, I'll try to stay within the lines on that one.
No, well colored. Thank you. There's a question about gray zone, which we have, as a government and as an alliance, dealt with for 5-6 years now at least. The challenge with gray zone, of course, is it goes beyond military instruments to include law enforcement and information operations and diplomacy and everything. How do you feel we're doing as an alliance dealing with the gray zone coercion that we're facing in the Western Pacific?
I'd say quickly that our recognition is better. I think we're doing, have greater awareness of those gray zone activities that are taking place, particularly those, that are being orchestrated out of Beijing. I still think that there is room for improvement on how we counter that, in terms either calling out malign activities in a public fashion and doing it quickly, or taking more demonstrative steps to counter those actions, once they're recognized. But I am starting to see progress, in that regard. I do, and again, personal opinion or personal observation, but what is taking place around the Senkakus every day on a daily basis by Chinese Coast Guard, maritime militia, fishermen, and others has raised and increased the public, that and the China Coast Guard law has increased the public dialogue here in Japan, which I think is beneficial. And I also think what happened in Hong Kong was certainly shook the ground a little bit in both of our capitals, and I think that is also shaping a lot of the thinking in a positive way about the dangers of gray zone activity, in and around this area.
I have a couple of questions about networking of our bilateral alliance with other alliances and partnerships. So, reference in the question section about U.S. Japan, Australia, the Quad, and then Korea. And so maybe we can do a round robin. Tell us how you see progress on, in terms of, our forces in Japan participating in, taking advantage of these new opportunities with Australia, with the Quad, and then any good news on the Korea front for us.
Certainly, and I'd say the willingness to do more multilaterally, especially with Australia and other Quad partners, is there. COVID challenges have kind of tamped our opportunities down a little bit, but as each nation gets past the curve and is going in the right direction on COVID mitigation measures, I do see greater opportunities for training, exercises, and high-level interaction. And I recognize that there's opportunities that tried to happen on the Quad events that were trying to take place on the margins of other things like air shows, places where CHODs and or other senior leaders were going to be in attendance, and there was just a natural desire for the four countries to get together and do something to continue that dialogue. So I am encouraged by that, and I think going forward into the next year, we're going to see more opportunities for exercises. On the relationship with the trilateral relationship between U.S., ROC, and Japan, that I see opportunity there, and I know General Milley has been very, very active, continuing to drive a tri-CHOD dialogue, and we just recently had one in Hawaii a few months ago. And certainly on a mill-to-mill aspect and mill-to-mill relationship, there is a desire to do more. That will move at the pace of local politics or domestic politics, But I think that what we can't allow to have happen is the old standard saying that the three nations have more in common than we do that separate us, and we've got to be able to continue to focus on the challenges in front of us. So it's not moving as fast as probably any of us would like, but I am at the same time encouraged by the fact that the mill-to-mill relationship and dialogue is pointed in the right direction between the three nations.
I get the sense that those in uniform in all three countries are ready to go for the most part, but the politics are complicated, and we have elections, big elections in both Japan and Korea this year. So we'll watch this space, I guess.
I certainly agree. Those in uniform, I think, again, are clear-eyed on the threats and challenges that face all of us collectively, and recognize that going forward in the future to be successful, we have got to work together, trilaterally or multilaterally, to be able to be effective.
The Pentagon has announced another global posture review, and I was in the NSC, on the NSC staff when we did the global posture review 15 years ago. These create all kinds of anxiety, expectations around the world, especially where we have a lot of forces stationed. Is there anything you can tell us about how you anticipate this going forward, our consultations with Japan, some of the concepts that will guide the posture review, particularly as it relates to the alliance with Japan?
Yeah, I am actually optimistic about the global posture review, and I think the timing is very opportune to have it. I also see as in headquarters, U.S. Indo-PACOM is also very focused on it as well, and as Admiral Aquilino comes on board, is taking a very hard look at the current posture, not just in Japan, but in the Pacific as a whole. So what's happening at Indo-PACOM and what's happening back in the Pentagon, I think, are really closely aligned. And I do know that, in meetings with senior Japanese leaders and as U.S. visitors come to Japan, there's great interest in terms of what is going to come out of the global posture review and the impacts that it has on Japan and the surrounding region. I'm not part of those dialogues. I can't predispose any discussions, but again, I see that as for the future 2+2 and the events that are going to happen later this year, being a topic of conversation, and one that the senior U.S. and Japanese leaders will start to get after in earnest. And I absolutely believe that the time is now to make changes and adjustments to our posture.
General, thank you. I'd end by noting that during your tenure as commander of U.S. Forces Japan, opinion polls supporting the alliance have gone up in both the U.S. and Japan. So as a social scientist, I can't attribute causality, just correlation, but I suspect you had a lot to do with that. Thank you for your service. Thank you for joining us today. I think for the awardees and for everyone working on the alliance, it's been a real privilege to hear your insights, and we really appreciate it.
So thank you for the feedback on the public opinion polls. I got 2 teenage daughters and a wife. I wish my public opinion polls were that high at home. But
that we can't help you with, but yeah. But thank them too, because as you pointed out earlier, it's the families that also make this possible.
Yeah.
General, thank you. I very much appreciate it. We're going to turn now to my friend Sheila Smith, who's going to introduce our awardees, tell you a bit about them, and over to you, Sheila.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike. And again, thank you again to Lieutenant General Snyder. That was a wonderful conversation and very thoughtful. I have the great privilege today, not only on behalf of Mike and myself, but my other colleagues at think tanks around Washington, D.C., to honor the legacy of Ambassador Ryozo Kato, and to do so by congratulating and awarding the 2021 Kato Prize to 2 terrific individuals, Hidehiko Nakama and Ben Goldberg. Now, I know the U.S. Japan community knows these 2 individuals well. Nakama-san, of course, has been involved in the partnership from the Ministry of Defense in Japan for over 25 years. He's served in all kinds of positions, but more importantly, if I tell you the issues he's worked on, you'll appreciate the heavy lift. He's worked on issues such as the SDF deployment to Iraq. He's introduced the ballistic missile defense system, and he's worked, of course, on the Phutema relocation plan. So Nakama-san, omedetou gozaimasu. Let me also introduce Ben Goldberg. He works for the Department of State. He works in the department's Bureau of Intelligence and Research, and therefore I cannot tell you what issues he has worked on because they're all secret. But Ben has been tending the garden of the U.S. Japan partnership for a very long time within the State Department. He was trained as a young person in East Asian studies, one of my favorite areas of specialty. I can't think of somebody inside the State Department who has had a bigger influence in the way our policymakers not only work with Japan, but understand Japan. So Ben, similarly, omedetou gozaimasu. We're delighted. So let me invite the two awardees to share a few comments with us. Nakama-san, would you like to go first?
Okay, thank you very much, Shira-san. Thank you for your introduction. It is truly my honor to be the recipient of this prize, and especially the prize bearing the name of Ambassador Kato Ryozo is special to me. And actually, I'm not sure the Ambassador Kato remember, but in past, I remember when he visited MOD to meet the defense ministers or senior officers. I was there, often I was there as a young escort officer or young note takers. I'm not sure he remembered me, but anyway, when I began working at the Japanese embassy in Washington, D.C. In the summer of 2009, unfortunately, the Ambassador Kato already left the post, but as embassy, I could feel there remained the spirit of Ambassador Kato, or good tradition of Ambassador Kato, because almost every day at the embassy, my colleagues quoted him, alliance management is something, the work of guardians, the typical one, and the other quotes are like this, to be real diplomat, don't rush. The first and second year is a period to learn the country and build the relationship. It is the third year, you can finally become a diplomat. Take care of your family, because without the support by family, the diplomat cannot do anything. Such kind of quote I learned, that is how I learned how Ambassador Kato said. And General Schneider, thank you very much for your kind word for congratulations. And to tell the truth, when I'm hearing your keynote speeches, I am reminded a lot of homework I have to do. And it makes my stomach a bit hard, but I will do my utmost together with your distinguished colleagues of USFJ to implement my homework and implement as many policies as possible to strengthen our alliance. And on this occasion, I'd like to bring up my senpai, Mr. Takamizawa, Ambassador Takamizawa no Bushige, because, I am not sure up until now whether I had made an accomplishment worthy to this prize. But if I did something, I think I owe a lot of that to Mr. Takamizawa. As Shira-san said, last 20 years, I witnessed the many events, historic events for the alliance. I clearly remember the moment when, GOJ decided to dispatch our unit to Iraq. GOJ decided to introduce a BMD system. GOJ decided to review and reconfirm the relocation of MCAS Futenma to Henoko. Or when the two governments worked together to take care of the Great East Japan earthquake and Fukushima nuclear crises. Every moment I was with Takamizawa-san, and he was always forward-looking, strategic, and pragmatic. And I believe he also being frank and honest to the American counterparts. Of course, being frank and honest not always means be gentle. I often saw he has a very tough discussion, severe negotiation with American friends. But I guess that is, we are in the same boat. And that's exactly why we have to have very frank, honest discussion. So now, yes, when I have to do a difficult decision, I always think what Takamizawa-san will do. So he will be my model case, role model as MD official and as my alliance manager. Anyway, I really appreciate this prize, and this prize, receiving this prize, surely encouraged and energized me. I took my mission to transform the alliance to meet the future challenges. You know, it's very exciting, at the same time very tough, but you know, encouraged by this prize and following Mr. Ambassador Kato and Ambassador Takamizawa, I'd like to play a bit more leading role to develop the alliance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nakama-san. Ben, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, thank you so much, Sheila. And thank you to Mike and to Kurt and to Ambassador Kato, my co-winner Nakama-san, General Schneider. I'm truly honored and delighted to win this award. And I hope it does help inspire me to do even more to try to contribute to and strengthen the alliance. Basically, this whole period I can speak should just be thanks. First to the mentors I already mentioned, who are here on the screen today, but also so many others, people I've learned from and gained expertise from, friends, colleagues at the Mansfield Foundation with my Network for the Future experience, which President Biden mentioned in his meeting with Prime Minister Suga in April, so I feel I can mention it too. And of course, everyone I've worked with at the State Department who has been incredibly supportive in supporting me, helping me learn, listening to me, and helping make this alliance even stronger and more broader and deeper as we move forward into this century. And as General Schneider and Mike and Nakama-san and Ambassador Kato also mentioned, I want to thank my family, my wife Elise and my daughters Gabriella and Madeline, who have put up with a lot of travel and discussion about Japan and issues that I have tried to deal with during my time at the State Department and even before. So thank you to everyone on this call and Zoom and everyone else. And I'm just deeply delighted. And最後に誠にKato賞をいただいて光栄でございます。誠にありがとうございます。以上です。
Wonderful. Thank you, Ben. So as you can see, this Kato Prize is really about the people, as General Snyder pointed out, whose exceptional work supports and sustains our partnership with Japan. And I think it's their advocacy of the relationship as much as the actual work that they do, their advocacy in their institutions and beyond that really makes them shine. And so to both of you, congratulations and thank you for the work that you do. Mike, back to you.
Thanks, Sheila. Thank you, Nakama-san. Thank you to Ben. Your remarks were also really terrific. I appreciate that. Normally, if we were in person, we would have a reception now. We'd enjoy some wine and further discussion. But you heard Kurt Campbell and General Schneider. We have a lot of work to do. So all I'll say in closing is to Ben and Nakama-san, congratulations, thank you, and get back to work. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Sheila and colleagues from the other think tanks, and have a good rest of your day.